Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading in the One Year Bible. My name's Stephen Mizell, and Jay Rivenbark and I are joined by Sheryl Daughety this week. And today we're in the Old Testament reading of Genesis 32 through 34. And we're talking about how wrestling with God transforms us, how the reconciliation between Jacob and Esau reveals God's grace. And we talk about the dangers of allowing emotions, whether it's anger or greed, to overtake us, and it makes us choose unwisely. So I hope you'll grab your Bible and a pen and paper, and let's have a conversation around the Word of God today. Hey everyone, today we're in the Old Testament reading in Genesis chapter 32 through 34, and there's this Jacob prepares to meet Esau after many years, and he fears revenge, and he's trying to resolve, soften the blow by sending gifts ahead. And that night he encounters this mysterious figure that he wrestles with till daybreak. And this is the second, time this week he would have had some supernatural encounter that we will have talked about. And after he reconciles with Esau, the family faces this tragedy when Dinah is assaulted and her brothers retaliate violently. In these basically 3 chapters, was there something that maybe I didn't propose a question about that you said, I want to talk about this?
We will talk about the brothers' reconciliation, but I think one of the things that I thought about was so he was told, your brothers headed in this direction with, I think it was 400 men. His automatic assumption was he's coming to attack me, and
He assumed the worst.
Yeah, he's gonna kill me. And I think in some ways you can't blame him for that, but I also think it's really interesting that he felt like he had seen God's forgiveness and blessing on his life, but his assumption was that his brother had not. So I just think that seems to be what he assumed out of the situation.
There's a lot going on in these chapters, but something that was really interesting to me is before he has the encounter where he wrestles during the night, he has prepared gifts to present to his brother when he meets him. I think that kind of sets the stage. The preparing the gift are a reflection of what has and is taking place in his heart, that he's getting ready to try to make amends. And that requires some action. It's one thing to say it, to think it, but to actually take some steps to prepare that. And then in that process, he finds himself alone in the camp. And I think the preparation part of our hearts and minds and our willingness to follow through on actions that show where our heart is, and then getting alone with God sets the stage for an encounter with him that we're not going to get any other place or any other time. And then we see this unique part of the story where he gets in this wrestling match, which to me, in my mind, I almost want to see a ring or around where they're going to get in there. And so, and they bring them in.
Jacob threw him off the ropes.
That's right. And they're just going to have this match, this grudge match. It's just going to last, the entire night till the next day.
What does Jacob's wrestling moment teach us about persistence in faith?
Well, the way I read it is that he wasn't willing to give up until his request had been granted and he got a blessing. And I think that teaches us not only being steadfast when circumstances are hard, but also that we pray with persistence and determination until we get what we're asking God for.
Yeah, not only do I see persistence in this, but the reality as it was with Jacob, oftentimes before God answers the prayer or the thing that we're really seeking after, in his case, the blessing here, it's going to cost us something that it very well may be painful in order to get ultimately to the blessing that we're seeking after.
the thing that I question about the whole story is, how did he survive all night with the angel?
Yeah.
I mean, my view of angels is it could have thumped him and it would have been over, right?
Mhm.
It was like, it was almost choreographed that, the angel plays along until he gets to the end of himself. That's, like, okay, I'm going to let you wear yourself out here. And
Isn't that often what happens to us anyway?
100%. Yeah. I mean,
Get to
God's
the
like,
end.
okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to let you wear yourself out here, and then we're going to do what I wanted
Yeah.
to do to start with.
Yep.
But the word for wrestle there, it does mean to grapple, which is why they translate it wrestle, but it also means to get dusty. That, he got dirty with the angel, so it was not, I don't think this was a pleasant encounter, I mean, I think so. At times more pronounced than others, you walk with a slight limp after your accident. There was nothing pleasant about that whole process, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, that would be 100% correct. There was nothing pleasant about the process.
It is a reminder of the process that you went through and the things that you learned and gained out of it. And I think the process should mark us in ways that we remember later. If it doesn't, I'm not sure the process was worthwhile.
Yeah, because you brought up of my incident early on in that process. I've often prayed, Lord, I don't like this. I don't want this. I'd like to change it, but I couldn't. But don't let me come out of this the same way I went in it. Don't let me be the same person I was. There has to be something of worth and value that I can learn from and through this experience. And I didn't want to miss that.
This concept of reconciliation happens between Jacob and Esau, which seems so unlikely. Am I correct? Like, in the grand scheme of things. There's, you mentioned it early on, he's coming with 400 men.
Mm-hmm.
I think the right assumption is they're going to kill you. I don't think there would have been any reason for him to think anything otherwise. But how does reconciliation with Esau show God's grace at work?
I think I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier because, Jacob assumed there has been no work in his brother's heart. There's been no change. There's been no blessing from God, which thank goodness was not the case. And so I think that the reconciliation happened not only because of the work that had happened in Jacob, but also in Esau, because the person that he was previous to that, the last person he had known, had been, oh yeah, I'm going to come after you. And when I find you, you're going down. I'm always going to be upset and bitter about this. But instead, something had happened in that amount of time that made Esau realize, I want reconciliation and relationship with my brother as opposed to revenge.
Who do you think it was harder for? Think it was harder for Jacob to go back or harder for Esau to forgive?
I would assume it was harder for Esau to forgive because despite who he was, it was still his birthright and it had been taken permanently. I mean, his dad instantly said, like, this blessing stands. I can't retract it. I can't now give it to you because your brother was deceitful.
Obviously, they both had challenges for different reasons, but for me, I think typically the hardest decision to forgive and be restored typically lies with the person who feels like they have been done wrong, that the offense was committed against him, even though he had a role to play in that part, with the birthright issue. He made some stupid decisions in the moment. He lacked wisdom that we've talked so much about. But typically, it appears that the person who perceives that they've had the greatest injustice often struggles the most with it.
So I have the opposite view. I'm curious, has anybody ever asked forgiveness and you didn't grant it?
I honestly can't think of No, that I didn't grant it. I may have granted it grudgingly.
Yeah.
or
It may have taken longer than I wish it
slowly,
had,
yeah.
but yeah.
Or dispensed it in increments, which I know
Got some do what?
I said that's not real forgiveness. You know, if you say, I'm going to give 25%
Yeah,
now.
you want
come back.
25% forgiven.
Yeah, and come back later and let's go through this.
I don't think, forgiveness doesn't always mean restoration of a relationship.
No,
because sometimes,
that's
100%
sometimes
true.
that's not the wisest thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of a situation where I haven't been willing to forgive somebody.
And maybe some of this is personality driven. Maybe it's just some of my own personal makeup. I don't know. I cannot think of a time that when somebody asked for forgiveness, I didn't immediately say, yes, you're forgiven. But I can think of hundreds of times when I was in the wrong that it took me a long time to ask for forgiveness.
Oh, I find it harder to ask than grant it.
So that's why I say I think it was harder for Jacob than it was for Esau. I think all Esau wanted Jacob to do was say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, because by this point, he's experienced God's blessings too. He wasn't left out of the equation because Isaac does pray a blessing over him.
Yeah.
Secondary, but he still gets a blessing. I think Jacob just had to get past this. I think that's the whole thing that's been going on. He's got to get over himself. But that's just my observation. I've preached a sermon and used this as a text twice, and I almost thought about coming back to it recently. I did it both times at baby dedications. There was something secondary going on here, and that's how I preached the message. So at the end of the book of Genesis, chapters 49 and so, you find Joseph forgiving his brothers, reconciling his brothers that had done him wrong, mistreated him, sold him into slavery, and he forgives them. He weeps. He's overwhelmed with emotion. And when you read this story, right, about Jacob coming to Esau, he sends a first group and some of his wives and some of his children in the first group. And then the second group goes ahead of him, and he keeps Joseph with him. Joseph is in his group. And Joseph is there peeking out from behind the wagon as Esau, because that's what it says. It just fell at his feet and wept, and he gets this picture of what reconciliation is supposed to look like. And when he's faced with that, he mimics it, but he mimics something that he has seen taking place already in his life, this reconciliation model. And so it made it, he does play with his brothers a little bit, but he still offers some reconciliation to them. Last question. What can we learn from the dangers of unchecked anger over in chapter 34?
When you let anger take control of you like that, this was a perfect example of how every man in that town paid the price for one sin that was committed by their leader. But, her brothers were so upset about it that they didn't only take revenge on him. They took revenge on every man that was laying around trying to heal from circumcisions.
So the question that I have about the whole story is how much influence did those cats have to have to talk every man into circumcising themselves?
I know, and the way that it's stated in the Bible is kind of like all the men were like, yeah, okay, we'll do it. I mean, what?
What?
I have a feeling that was a whole lot more like, we're going to come hold you down, and then you're going to do it,
Yeah, fighting and screaming.
What did they have besides alcohol to help the situation? I don't know how much wine that would take.
There is a little clue, though, I think, to that answer, because I've often thought, how stupid, but in verse 23 of chapter 34, he says when he's selling this idea to the people, he says, but if we do this, all their livestock and possessions will eventually be ours.
Mhm.
And so greed got in there, and they thought, okay, if we do assimilate them in, and eventually this is going to pay off for us, and there will be something in it. So therefore, we're willing to make a stupid decision, literally expose ourselves, as it were, here, and go through all this. But ultimately, it cost them their life.
They
Yes,
made
it
a stupid
did.
decision. Then
Yes.
Simeon and Levi also make a dumb decision out of anger.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have said this frequently. I cannot think of a time when I got angry and did something better.
Yeah.
Better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it turned out really good. So I'm so glad I got angry and did
Now,
that.
there have been
Yeah.
some times I've been angry and just been able to
Yeah.
navigate it,
Mm-hmm.
but I ain't going to say it was better.
Mm-hmm.
But I can think of a lot of times I got
Oh,
angry
100%.
and made it worse.
Yeah.
Unchecked anger causes so much heartache and pain.
It's like a wildfire. It burns
Mhm.
down whatever it's exposed to.
You know, not only did lots of innocent people die, but then his dad is like, "What have you done to me?" Because now,
Right.
you know, we're small compared to living around big cities at the time, and he's like, "You've made us vulnerable to everybody now because now you've put this stigma on us, and I didn't even know you were going to do that, basically, because you're so hot-headed."
Right.
And decided the right way to handle this was with revenge. Then now you've brought
I would have thought
this danger on your whole
just the
family.
whole, you talked them all into circumcising themselves would have been enough punishment. You need to, do something worse.
Mm.
You ask about alcohol. When you said it, the thing that popped in my mind, I read an autobiography. Is that what you call it? Biography, autobiography.
If you write it yourself, it's an
It's
autobiography.
It's a biography about John Adams that Walter Isaacson had written. And in my opinion, he's the greatest biographer of our time. But it was about John Adams, and it tells in there of his daughter having breast cancer. So, 200
Wow. That's surprising that was even
Some years
diagnosed.
ago.
Yeah.
and they gave her a full mastectomy with no pain medication,
Oh.
only
What?
some alcohol, right?
What?
And
I don't even know how you would endure that.
it's crazy,
Oh.
right? But you
But I mean,
think
they did
that's
it in
all
the
they
wars
had.
and
Yeah.
took people's legs and limbs
Yeah.
off. That
They
way.
did it. I mean, it had to be done.
Yeah.
Those are the options. And so there's a lot of stupidity in chapter 35.
lot.
Just a whole lot. It should prove to us that when any emotion, greed, anger takes over wisdom, we're headed for a downfall. Thank you for joining us again today on One Single Story. We leave this section and Jacob has a limp, a new name and a new identity. And sometimes God wounds us just enough to remind us who we truly are. I hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.